Hey y'all, just wanted to drop in here for this module and give you a little overview of what even is a design system or a style guide, and just provide a basic introduction. These terms sometimes can be interchangeable, and there's a great video down below here, a few spots down, that actually talks about the differences and the nuances between design systems, style guides, and pattern libraries. I just thought it'd be good and helpful to kind of kick this module off with an overview of design systems, because I know this term will probably be new to most of you. However, you probably interact with the design system every single day and just don't know it, which is really cool. This is also an area that just recently in my career I've really invested in and feel very passionate about, because when you move into a position in a corporate setting, or if you're working on a team that services a variety of different products, a design system or a style guide even really just helps streamline the process, make sure everybody's speaking in the same language, and when somebody says a button, they know what exactly the size is and what colors it should be and what font it should include. And design systems and documentation really help go a long way to define what that is. So if you like the nitty gritty and the details and the minutia of design and really kind of nerd and geek out on that, then this is going to be a great a module and a great exercise for you. And so let's just jump in a little bit and talk about what is a design system, what you can expect as we're talking about design systems and style guides. Maybe let's start with a brief history of UI and user interface. It really started back in the 1970s, probably started way before that. But this was one of the early, trailblazers, the early screens. If you do a quick YouTube search or Google search for the Xerox Star, one of the first kind of human to computer interaction the devices or screens, and really its main point was to take kind of what you see on paper and be able to mirror that on an interface or on a screen. And so, as you can imagine, the technology at that time was huge and blew a lot of people's minds. And so this video is actually a really cool video. If you watch it, it'll kind of take you back to the really early days, maybe of your parents or more, of the early trailblazers, some of the technology they would have interacted with that really helped set the foundation for graphic design, UI design as we know it, as we know it today. 1970s is really kind of where it kind of kicks off for me. 1980s, you have the pioneers of consumer consumption. And so think about Macintosh or your Apple products or Windows coming on the scenes in the 1980s. And some of the really cool things that I think about is, Windows still has these skill games. Their menu is still in the top left corner. Minimize might still be here on the right. Thinking about if you're a Mac user, even from the 1980s, this very top section of your Mac hasn't changed. And so those UI patterns, those UI principles of navigation in the top left, logo in the top left, navigation items in the top left, have been around forever, been around from the 1980s. And so even in the early stages of UI design, the Macintosh in 1983 still today has some of the same placement, the same elements. Finder windows and things like that still look the same. And even looking back at the early interfaces, you can see that if you look at your Mac today, not much really has changed itself. Then you move into the 1990s, and this is really the golden age of dial-up internet. And so I can remember, logging on to AOL at this time in my life and interacting with these same websites. In 1996, you had Space Jam or Ask Jeeves or Ask the Internet. Celebrity pages started popping up, and fantasy baseball and fantasy sports were starting to be played. And this is where you really started to get more creative, where imagery and uses of PNGs and transparent PNGs and Flash and all different types of technology that created custom, unique interfaces. Layout started to be explored more. The downfall was it took forever to get online, but you can see some of the different trends and patterns from the 1990s there in a sampling of UI. The 2000s really were the wild west of UI design. This is where I really cut my teeth early on in UI design. There was a thing called MySpace. If you hadn't heard of it, it was the precursor to Facebook. And MySpace kind of opened up the customization of code and allowed you to kind of create custom MySpace pages. And that's really where I started to dabble in kind of coding, from a basic foundational level, messing with style sheets and style guides to create unique interfaces inside of MySpace. Google hasn't changed since it came on early on the scenes in the 2000s, and Yahoo still has a lot of those same trends from when it came on the scenes in the early 2000s as well. And so really the wild west of UI design, this is where you started to see more creative layout, more unique layout, but really some of the things that you interact with today haven't really changed much, and that's because their patterns and principles and their users have adopted those positions and locations of Google is always going to be search right in the middle. Yahoo is always going to have helpful, vibrant links to be able to quickly navigate into what you're looking for. And not much has changed since a lot of these interfaces came on the scene, with the exception of maybe MySpace not being as relevant as it was back in the early 2000s. And today it's all about clean lines, strong photography, and consistency across devices and screens. If you pull up the Airbnb website on your desktop, you bring it up on your phone, you're going to see some similar patterns, some similar UI elements from device to device, from screen to screen. You pull up Amazon, same thing on the desktop versus on your mobile device. Even on the desktop app or on the Amazon app, you're going to see consistency from screen to screen. It's all because of a common design language, common patterns, common UI elements that really just help your design scale no matter what screen or device that you find yourself on. ESPN the same way. You're going to see a similar experience between desktop and mobile for responsive design, but then also on application design as well. And so maybe that's just a brief history of UI design. You can see that even from the 1980s, your laptop, your MacBook, your Windows machine, those basic principles, those basic design elements haven't really changed, and websites haven't really changed too much for over the years. The thing that makes it difficult and challenging is that your user base is always changing. Their needs are always changing. Your business goals, your key performance indicators, the things that identify success on your website, those key goals are what commonly changes. Patterns and principles have been around and are some of them are fairly established, and so leverage those as we go into UI design, especially in way of navigation, buttons, and things like that. So let's talk about design systems and style guides. If you ask 5 professionals what is a style guide or a design system, you're probably going to get 5 different answers. Here's 2 good answers that I really like. This is Nathan Curtis, founder and principal of 8 Shapes. It's a great follow on Twitter. A style guide is an artifact of a design process. A design system is a living, funded product with a roadmap, a backlog, serving an ecosystem. And so some of those terms might be new, but essentially it boils down to a style guide being an artifact that kind of stands alone, kind of an artifact of the actual design process itself. It has a lot of the key elements of that design, that final UI design. Design system is something that's going to be living, breathing, ever changing, and is a lot more in depth. And we'll talk about that. Some great examples of design systems down below in this module, and go way more in depth than this type of style guide that we're going to be doing for this project here in this module. Another one from Michael Godbolt was, once you get past the tedium of building the same thing over and over again, we can focus our energy on more worthwhile tasks like accessibility, performance, iteration. We can work on fun stuff rather than the tedious things. And so this boils down to, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. We can establish what a button looks like and then use that button over and over and over again, no matter what screen, no matter what device that we're on. And when we establish those patterns, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and it allows us to solve those user-based problems. It allows us to solve the challenges of how does a user navigate from page to page? How do we complete the primary goal of maybe applying and finding our apartment and not have to worry about what a button color should be? And really, when we're talking about this, it's really the difference between UI and UX. We can establish what the user interface is going to look like, set up those common principles, then we can really worry about how to design best for our persona, how to design best for our goals, and for some of our key success metrics of our design itself. Think about Legos. I'm sure perhaps a lot of y'all grew up playing with Legos like I did. Legos are really fundamentally a design system. You have these dots on top of blocks, and they stack on top of each other. They're either going to be 4 blocks or 8 blocks or 16 blocks. They're always going to be multiples of 2 or 4, and they're going to come in different shapes and colors, but they're all going to be pretty much rectangles and just have different types of depths and things like that. You think about a design system, what that could do is you have a lot of unorganized parts and pieces. You can organize those into similar patterns. So perhaps you define all the buttons, perhaps you define all the text styles, and from that you can build any number of objects that look like they're all a part of the same family. And so let's maybe take a look at a few examples of what happens when there are some great design systems in place or some great style guides and pattern libraries in place, and when there aren't any in place. And so let's maybe start with one example. U.S. government websites. We're just kind of coming up into tax seasons and things like that. And perhaps you maybe have went to some of these websites before. The whitehouse.gov just got a great facelift, and it's a beautiful looking website. But if you go to FBI.gov or IRS.gov, it looks completely different. These are all .gov websites. They're all part of the same family, but yet they don't look consistent. They don't look like they're a part of the same family. And that's really where a style guide or a design system that defines those patterns would really help out and come into play here. The ironic thing is the United States government actually has a really great design system. If you just search United States Web Design System, you can see all the foundations, the documentation, components that are a part of that design system. And they actually have a really great design system. It's just not leveraged on every single website. So it's kind of ironic when we're talking about design systems and seeing that us.gov website, or the government websites that don't really have that consistency, but they actually do have a really solid design system. Let's take a look at some of the examples of when there is a design system in place. And perhaps the first one that comes to mind are Google products. If you interact with Google products like Google Drive, Google Maps, Google Docs, Sheets, Excel, or presentation files, slides, Google Drive, they all look and feel the same. And it's so intuitive, so easy to use those products. And that's because no matter where you go on their products, the navigation is pretty consistent. The iconography is really consistent. The button styles are very consistent. The type structure is consistent from application to application, from page to page. And so perhaps this is an example of a design system that you interact with every single day, but maybe you just didn't know that there was somebody who was actually caring about that on the other side from Google's design team itself. How about another example? Here's just maybe this an overview of that. It's the current ongoing trend in UI design is to establish a design system, a style guide, and so any number of these websites you can go to and just do a quick Google search of Trello style guide or Airbnb design system or BuzzFeed design system, and you'll see some great examples of design systems that are really an extension of each of these companies' brands that identify how they're going to implement that brand into their user interface, into their web design. Some examples of that: Google's material design. So if you search for Google material design, you'll come to this website, and it really goes into defining, every in and out, the ins and outs of every design pattern or principle as it relates to Google products. Also open source, so you can take inspiration from it. You can use it out of the box. Adobe XD has a plugin for Google material design, and Google's has a number of UI UX designers and product design teams scattered across the globe. And so how do you bring all those people together to design similar products? And it boils down to having a shared language, a common style guide, a common design system to be able to empower products that look and feel all the same. Apple has something called the HIG, or the Human Interface Guidelines. And so if you have an Apple device and you bring up your Maps app, your Calendar app, your Calculator app, they're all gonna, your Mail app, they're all gonna look and feel the same. They're all gonna use similar patterns and buttons and styles, no matter what product you're in, no matter what application you're in. And that all is being leveraged out of the Human Interface Guidelines by Apple. Another one is Shopify's Polaris, and this example of a design system really focuses a lot on content, how to best leverage content, your tone, your voice, your look and feel, and so oftentimes that content can be overlooked by designers, but this design system expects content to be thoughtfully designed and cared for by their designers, and even before the visuals are even considered. And so Polaris is a great example of a design system also. And if you interact with any Shopify products or sites, they're all going to look and feel the same, and that's because they have a great design system, a great style guide in place. Maybe one final one is IBM's Carbon, and so this is a very thorough, robust design system. You can see here they outline individual components that you've probably interacted with before or have said in the past or are familiar with, like a button or breadcrumbs, accordions or drop downs, a date picker, where you're maybe picking your date, a date on Airbnb or on Open Table, where you're selecting from a calendar. That would be a date picker. Drop downs, form fields, links, lists, modals, notifications, pagination, radio buttons, search menus, selects. There's just so much here in IBM's Carbon. And most of these organizations, not most, all of these organizations have several designers who are dedicated to building these design systems to ensuring the products that they build as a team, as an enterprise, remain consistent and remain a part of the same family. So in this module, I've included some examples of some basic style guides. And in this next video below this, I'm going to go into how we're going to create our style guide for this project, but just wanted to give an overview of what design systems are, why they're important, and also maybe how they actually play a role in your day-to-day life based off the applications that you use. You just might not have known that they were called design system. The team that I manage at the company that I work for owns and maintains our design system for our enterprise, and we build thousands of products based off of that design system itself that we've established. And so when a group of designers are sharing a common language, have common design principles, common philosophies as it relates to brand and creative, graphic design, UI design, it just creates a cohesive look and feel no matter what product, no matter what device, no matter what platform you might be interacting with. So a lot of great examples of very robust design systems. Don't worry, we're not going to be doing anything this robust for this project, this milestone, but just thought it'd be helpful to provide some insights into another realm of UI UX design called design systems. And we're kind of going to do a minified version of a style guide for our apartment website. So more to come on that in the next video down below, but just wanted to take a moment to talk about design systems, why they're important, how they play a part in UI UX design, and just give you some food for thought, some ideas as to this whole nother world of UI UX design called design systems. And so we're going to focus on now kind of the minified version of that, of a style guide for this project. And so check out the next video and we'll go into more in depth specifically to this assignment in this project. So thanks y'all. Hopefully this is helpful.